So Ghost of Tsushima's sequel just got announced. So in celebration of that, I figured we should see if the original holds up 4 years later and if you should be playing it in 2024. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, now let's talk about the performance and visuals of Ghost of Tsushima. Also, if you don't really care about graphics or performance and you just want to hear me talk about gameplay and story elements, feel free to skip this part of the video. Now, when this game released on PC, there was an influx of players complaining about texture quality, lighting quality, etc. Now, this is semi-understandable considering it doesn't match the latest releases when it comes to visual fidelity, but then again, it's a 2020 game and it wasn't advertised as a remaster or a remake, it was advertised as a PC port. So I thought these complaints were a little stupid. And in my opinion, it holds up really well, especially for being 4 years old. Sure, it might not have ray tracing or insane texture, but it has a really unique art style that makes it stand out among other games in the genre. Now, when it comes to performance, I played this on a PC. My PC specs are an RX 5700 XT and a Ryzen 5 5500. All the gameplay you're seeing was captured on 1080p high settings, and I was getting a good 90 to 100 FPS all of the time. So yeah, overall really good performance, especially in the era of some pretty bad PC ports. And also, all the landscapes in this game look simply fantastic, from the mountaintops to the trees swaying in the wind. Everything looks really good. So yeah, overall the graphics hold up pretty well and I wouldn't really consider it a low point of this game. Alright, now let's talk about the combat of Ghost of Tsushima. Now, I actually really enjoyed the combat and felt it was a high point of the game. It's reminiscent of Arkham, Assassin's Creed, and a little bit of Dark Souls. However, it takes a unique approach with the stance system. As you probably know, you have only access to one main weapon in the game, that being the katana. But due to the stance system, it actually feels like the game has pretty good variety in combat. There are 4 main stances and each one gives you a certain advantage over an enemy type. The stone stance can be used against swordmen, the moon stance can be used against brutes, the wind stance can be used against spears, etc. And this makes it so that you have to really think on your toes and switch in the midst of combat. And the switch is pretty seamless because you can just hold R2 and press square, X, triangle, or circle to select one of the 4 stances. And the combat gets more and more fun as the game goes on, as you unlock more and more abilities and the enemies get stronger and stronger. When combat starts, sometimes you get the opportunity for a samurai standoff in which you can kill an enemy in one hit with a good timed button press. And later in the game, you can kill multiple enemies and basically end the fight before it even starts. Throughout the game, you also unlock things like sticky bombs and kunai for crowd control and dealing with multiple enemies. Also, the parrying is extremely fun in this game. It's reminiscent of games like Sekiro, albeit the timing isn't as hard as that game, but it's insanely satisfying to pull off. If you do a perfect parry, you can get a super cool riposte that basically destroys your enemy's health bar. Abilities like this, along with the other ones I mentioned, make it so that you can deal with a lot of enemies very fast. You get more and more enemies to deal with throughout the game. Eventually, taking down a group of Mongols will be elementary, but doing it with style is the hard part of the game. And if you get overwhelmed, the Mongols can kill you pretty easily. There are also many bosses in the world of Ghost of Tsushima. There are a handful of main story ones that I won't spoil, but a lot of them are just found in the open world, and there's some really cool katana duels. These side quest duels are some of the best content in the game, and they reward you with a pretty cool ability. Like, for example, in one of them, you unlock a really cool armor set, or you unlock an ability that makes you attack really fast. But most of your abilities, healing, and a lot of other things consume resolve. The resolve system in this game is pretty cool. You can either spend 1 resolve on healing, or you unlock an ability where you can kill 3 enemies at once. So if you're feeling daring, you can end the fight before it even starts, but then you won't have the opportunity to heal. It's a good balance. But probably the most satisfying part of Ghost of Tsushima's combat is you have to earn every ability, armor set, and stance that you unlock. Because in the beginning of the game, combat is very bare bones and you have just some broken armor. That's it. But as the story progresses, you get more and more efficient at taking down Mongols. This makes it so that combat rarely gets boring. And because of this, I'm actually pretty excited to see what Sucker Punch can do in the sequel with the increased weapon variety and location. And in this game, Jin's weapons change in addition to his emotions. Throughout his whole life, he's been taught that you need to fight people with honor, and killing someone isn't someone to be taken lightly, but he has to change that ideology when it comes to the Mongols, because they don't abide by that code. But that brings me to the next part of this video, the story. Now, I'm not going to be spoiling anything major, but if you want to go in completely blind, I'd recommend skipping this part of the video. But with that out of the way, I actually think Ghost of Tsushima's story is one of the best in the gaming industry as a whole. It has compelling characters, insane set pieces, and an overall amazing ending. But honestly, what carries this game's story above all else is the main protagonist, Jin Sakai. He truly feels grounded in the world he inhabits, and you actually care what happens to him in the end. His motivations all make sense, and they dive into his psyche a good amount, but they do more of that in Iki Island, which by the way is a great DLC. If you enjoy this game, definitely play the DLC. The story has 3 main acts, with each having one objective, and you have 3 main landscapes landscapes for each act. In Act 1, there are much more vibrant landscapes. In Act 2, there are more desolate forests and the Mongols are burning stuff. And in Act 3, you're in the snow. And in my opinion, the change in scenery really helps the pacing of the game overall. Now, the story obviously is based on the real invasion of Tsushima Island, but the game definitely takes some liberties with historical events, and don't get it twisted, it's not like Assassin's Creed with actual historical figures. None of the characters in this game were actually real. That being said, it does have pretty good historical accuracy in the architecture, and it does make you feel like you're in this time period. The Mongols actually serve as a threatening force, and the main antagonist of the game I thought was actually handled really well, and it played into Jin's transformation from a samurai to the ghost. I've heard a lot of people recently complaining about how Jin actually didn't need to become the ghost, but I completely disagree. If Jin and the people of Tsushima as a whole didn't employ the tactics they did, the Mongols would have defeated them instantly, full stop. We saw that on Komoda Beach in the start of the game. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, I think this game has amazing storytelling and it's some of the best in the genre and gaming as a whole. Alright, now let's get into the stealth of Ghost of Tsushima. Now, I love stealth games. I've made a lot of videos here on this channel about Assassin's Creed, and I made a top 10 best stealth games of all time. And stealth is a pretty big component of Ghost of Tsushima because the whole idea of Jin becoming the ghost is that he takes a stealthier approach to enemy encounters so he doesn't get overwhelmed. Now, I'd say for the most part, the stealth in this game is handled pretty well. You have stealth tools like wind chimes and smoke bombs, you have stealth armor sets like the Ghost and Ronin armor, and you have a Tonto, which is basically a dagger you use for stealth, which is relatively slow in the beginning, but you upgrade it over time, and I really like this idea because it shows how Jin is becoming more of the ghost and he's becoming more efficient in stealth kills. And one thing I really like about this game is that in the first act, stealth is pretty bad and you can't really use it that well, but in the second and third act, it becomes more and more prevalent and you get more and more tools to suit it, and there are more enemies, so oftentimes you have to use stealth, otherwise you're gonna die. In the second act, you unlock the Ghost Dance, which is basically something where if you get killed without taking damage, you can charge it up and you can kill 3 enemies at once and you terrify them no matter what type of enemy they are. Now, obviously you can do this in regular combat, but it's really hard because killing enemies without taking damage in this game just is hard in general, or any game. So this is obviously an ability more suited for stealth. You also have an ability you unlock early in the game called chain killing, which is basically you kill someone and then if there's another enemy in the proximity, you kill them, and you can chain this up to 3 people if you upgrade it. Now, this is very reminiscent of the Arkham Knight ability called Fear, and honestly, I love Arkham Knight, so it's super cool to see them paying homage to this, and the animations are super cool and brutal. Like I said earlier, there are stealth-based armors like the Ronin and Ghost armor that decrease your detection speed, but there's also the Mongol Commander armor, which adds a splash of social stealth because the Mongols think you're one of them. Until you attack someone, they just won't do anything about it. Now, I've just spent basically a minute pricing this game's stealth tools, so this game has to have amazing stealth, right? Well, there is one major flaw with the stealth, and honestly, this is probably my main major flaw with this whole game, and that is the enemy AI. Now, the AI is fine in combat, the enemies react to each other's moves and your moves accordingly. In stealth, the AI is dumb as rocks. In my experience, enemies will barely recognize bodies, and if they do, a guard 2 feet away from them won't even recognize it too. They don't alert each other that there's a dead body, and they just keep doing the regular actions. It's pretty weird. This discouraged me from doing stealth because while the tools and weapons are really cool for stealth, doing stealth is basically an easy mode in this game. Now, this issue does improve in the later game because enemies have eagles and there are more enemies patrolling the camps, but still, it's pretty sad. And when I did use stealth, I wouldn't really use the armors that decrease detection. I would just use the regular armors because with the armors that decrease detection, you'll basically never get spotted. But then again, this does play into a similar thing I said with combat, where Mongols are pretty easy to take out alone, but when they have strength in numbers, that's really where the game gets hard. And I think this does apply too in stealth. And don't get it twisted, the AI didn't stop me from enjoying stealth, but it made it so that I didn't want to put as many skills in it because I knew if I did, I would be way too overpowered. But yeah, despite the bad AI, the stealth in this game is still really enjoyable, and if you like stealth games, you're probably gonna enjoy this game, even if the AI isn't the smartest I've ever seen. Alright, now let's talk about the open world of Ghost of Tsushima. I actually enjoyed the open world in this game a good amount. Like I said earlier, there's variety with Act 1, 2, and 3, and the open world is just beautiful in general. It has something you may have heard of called the wind system, which is one of the most immersive things I've ever seen in an open world game. Basically, when you swipe up on the touchpad, the guiding wind appears and it can guide you to your destination. There's something really cool and immersive about it, and in my opinion, it's way better than the typical map markers or waypoints that most open world games use nowadays. There's also barely any visible HUD, meaning you can take in the beautiful sights of the open world without distractions. There are a lot of collectibles and side quests to do in the open world, but nothing too crazy like the Riddler trophies or anything. You just have some hot springs, some sword cutting bamboo things, and that's pretty much it. I know some people will immediately get mad by hearing this, but it's kind of similar to a Ubisoft open world format. Not that that's a bad thing, it just is pretty similar to that formula. And the side quests are also really good from the tales, which are basically stories about a certain character, and you also have the mythic tales, which are probably my favorite, which let you unlock a new armor set or ability, and they have a really cool animation that play in the front, and you just find these in the open world, and they could be really fun. And other than that, you basically have your typical outposts or Mongol encampments that you would find, like I said, in a Ubisoft open world. So yes, game's open world is overall pretty good, and it can be entertained throughout the whole game. Alright, it's conclusion time. Do I recommend Ghost of Tsushima in 2024? And in my opinion, the answer is a resounding yes. Yes, I probably am pretty biased because I like historical games and samurai in general, but I think this game did something really special and deserves to be highlighted even 4 years later. So if you were on the fence about Ghost of Tsushima, or you were just remotely interested in it in any way, I would highly recommend giving it a try. It's an amazing game, and I don't think you'll regret it. Thanks for making it to the end. If you enjoyed this video, check out this video where I reviewed God of War in 2024.